Hello and welcome to the Fearfully and Wonderfully Made podcast. My name is Jenn, and I'm from Out of the Darkness Ministry. This podcast is dedicated to women's Bible study. So thank you, and I really hope that this edifies you in some way. All right, thanks for joining us today. And like the intro said, my name is Jenn, and I'm from Out of the Darkness Ministry. And today I am here with Sandy. Sandy or or Sandra? What do you like to be called, Sandy or Sandra?
Sandy's good.
Okay, so I'm here with Sandy, and she's going to be giving us her testimony today. And testimonies I love listening to testimonies because I feel that it glorifies God. It shows people what God has brought us through or helped us, throughout our life. And so I hope that this encourages you, whoever's listening, and just edifies you. So, Sandy, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Did you grow up in the church, or did you come to Christ later on in life?
I was very young whenever I met the Lord, and my parents were not Christians when I was little, and they got married whenever my mother was 14 and my dad was 18, and they were from farmer families. And my mother's mother, my grandma Sargent, she was a very devoted Christian all of her life from a young person. And they didn't really go to church a lot. They lived way out in the country and everything. But I don't really know how she became a Christian, but she was always devoted. And until she died, she just every day she lived for the Lord. And she lived with us for a few years before she passed away. And I have a lot of good memories of how, what a great Christian she was. And so that was in my mother's background. But then whenever she married my dad, well, they weren't married very long, and then the World War II came, and then he left to go into the Army. And so I was born at the end of World War II. And so our family, my mother and dad, we when I was about 3 years old, I think we moved to California, and they never went to church or anything. But they were had high morals and, really good people, but they just didn't go to church. And I don't remember my mother ever talking about God or anything. She really loved to read. And so when I was little, she always bought me those little golden books, and we read a lot. So I learned to love to read and study. And so when we moved to California when I was about 3, and so no knowledge of the Lord then. And then my aunt and uncle from Texas, they had moved out there too, and they were Christians. And he was my daddy's brother. And so they always went to church. And then as I got around probably 5 years old, and I would visit them a lot. And they had a couple of girls a little older than me, and we were close cousins, and played together and everything. So they didn't live very far from us. And on Sundays, they were always in church, and my aunt was a really great Sunday school teacher. And so they invited me, and so I would walk over to their house on Sunday morning, probably a couple of blocks, and go with them to church and Sunday school. And I really loved going to Sunday school because my aunt was a great teacher, and she would do the flannel board, what that is, where they had the characters, and she would put all the characters up there and tell the stories. And And I still remember how wonderful that was, and just so beautiful. And she did a wonderful job. And they would sing choruses, and I learned the choruses. And get my train of thought here. So I was probably about 5 years old then, and I loved, going. Oh, and one of the things that I really loved about going was I've always loved sugar, and I still do. I'm just a sugar baby. And so in Sunday school, to get kind of just a little fun thing to make kids want to come to Sunday school, well, they would like have a drawing, and then it would be like how many rows where the kids sat, well, then they would all put their number in, and then whoever got their number drawn that Sunday, well, they would like win a little bag of candy. And so, of course, me with my sugar, I loved to go to Sunday school because that drawing would be happening. And one time I did win a sack of lemon drops, and I was so happy. So the Lord, He knows all about you, and so He knew that I loved candy, and that would for sure make me want to walk over on Sunday and go with my aunt. And so, and also about how the Lord knows you. He knows your life already. He knows your weaknesses, and He, in our weakness, He's made strong. And one thing that we have in our family, and I had it ever since I was a little child, and I don't know why, but I had a lot of depression in my life. And even when I was a little child, I would be sad and like feel like nobody loved me or something, which my parents were very good to me. They didn't mistreat me at all. But it was just that loneliness feeling, that you can have. And so I had I just felt lonely even when I was small. And so whenever I got going to church with my aunt, and I was loving church and all that, and I learned so much. And then we all moved back to Texas, and I was probably about 6 when we moved back to Texas. And so then I started going to church with them again. And it was in Amarillo, and it was a wonderful church. It was the first Foursquare Gospel Church in Amarillo. And the pastors were like wonderful pastors, and they had a radio program on Sunday morning of singing, and then the pastor had a little message, and he was really good to have the kids be involved in things. And so he would have, his daughter was about my age, and he had a couple of other kids, but she was my age, and we would go and sing on the radio, just a bit. And he just made us feel part of the church, and he always prayed for the kids and taught them. And even as a little kid, I loved to hear him preach, and, I listened to everything. And so I was going with my aunt and uncle to church there, and I just took, everything to heart. I loved the Lord. And so then one night I went to church with them, and I went down to the altar. And in those days, we really got down at the altar and kneeled down and prayed. It wasn't like just a minute, they really prayed. And so I went down there, and I just was crying and sobbing, and just, I got saved, like 100%. And but I stayed down there at the altar praying and crying. And then I started speaking in tongues, and I got filled with the Holy Ghost. And it was like I still just remember that wonderful feeling. And I stayed at the altar praying. People were, church was over and everything, and people were leaving, and I was still, and they said that I stayed down there over 2 hours without even getting up from kneeling, just sobbing, praying, speaking in tongues, and, it was like a complete, I don't know, spiritual, it changed my whole life, even from just a little child. And so I went home, and then my aunt was telling my mother. And of course, my mother, from her mother being a great Christian, well, she knew that was real, and so I would go home after Sunday, and I would tell my mother and daddy all about what the sermon was about, just everything. And I would just tell them all of it, and I knew it word for word. And I loved all of it, and I would just practically preach to them every week, And so as time went on, I just kept on talking to them, telling them all of this. And so my mother, she started going to church with me. And then she got saved, and really, at one point in her life, she probably was saved, when she was younger, but then just through the years, she just kind of, I guess they would say, backslid, but she just didn't go to church or anything. But I preached to her all the time, and she started going with me, and she really got saved, and then she loved going to all of the services, and, she really got, saved for sure, and filled with baptism, and so we loved to go to church and sing and pray, and just a really on fire church. And so, but my daddy, he didn't go. And so when I was probably about 9 years old, well, my mom I remember this really vividly. She was ironing in the living room, and then my dad was talking to her, and then he said that he wanted to get right with the Lord. And so she prayed with him, and then when they were praying and all, he saw a vision that he was on, like, he could see hell, and he was like on the edges, and he could look down, and the fire was coming up and everything, and then he was falling into hell, and then God's hand just caught him and brought him back. And it was a really vivid vision that he saw. And so he also got the baptism there at our house in the living room. And so my mother and daddy both were on fire Christians, and they studied the Bible, and we went to every service. I mean, we went to like every teacher's meeting, every service, every camp out, we were totally going to church and praying all the time. And
so God used you to pretty much bring in your family, right?
Right. And I was so happy, and my mother and daddy, they started teaching Sunday school, and they taught Sunday school forever. I mean, I don't know, when Daddy died, he probably hadn't been quitting teaching for very long. But yeah, they just taught Sunday school, and then at that church, they did a lot of, even though it wasn't a very big church, the pastors just taught everyone so much. And like the young people's service, they would have, on Sunday evenings before church started. And they would do drama things. They would make up plays right then, and they would have plays. And at Christmas, they would have a big Christmas service, and people would be dressed as angels and singing. And, it was really not just going to church and having a little, get together and pray a little bit and all that. I mean, it was like a complete devotion to the Lord, and just everything in your life was just around the Lord. And so I was like, probably like considered a fanatic. I mean, I was sincere about every drop of it. I believed in the Lord. I loved the Lord, and I didn't care. I would tell anybody. I was very, willing to talk to people about it, tell people. And so one time, whenever I was in school, and I was probably there was 2 or 3 times that something like this happened, but I like the thing they say now is, what would Jesus do? So they have the bracelets and all. But that's really what I would do. If something come up, I would tell my mother, well, I'm going to do what Jesus would do. If I think this is wrong, that Jesus wouldn't do it, I wouldn't do it. I didn't care who made fun of me or what. I was totally devoted to the Lord. And one incident was, it was getting close to Easter Sunday, and I was probably in the 6th grade. And so my class, the teachers decided that we would have a skating party for our Easter party. And we were going to go to the skating rink, probably it was during the week. It was probably like the Thursday before you get out for Easter, Well, they were going to take everybody to the skating rink. And I just said, well, I just don't believe that would be something that would glorify the Lord, to go skating for Easter. I don't know. I mean, now I think it's kind of funny, it was probably just fine. But that was in my heart, no, I don't want to go skating to celebrate Easter. And so I told them that I didn't want to go. So they thought that we were religious and that my mother was not letting me go, And so they sent a note home to my mother and told her that, pretty much that I had to go, and that she shouldn't be keeping me out of doing it. And so she went and talked to him, and she said, I have nothing to do with this. This is just, her decision. She doesn't want to go because she feels like it's not right. And it doesn't, if she wants to go, I'm okay with her going, but this is her decision. And so they said, well, okay, but she's going to have to stay here at the school by herself while we all go to the skating rink, and there'll be somebody there, to watch over her. And so I did. They went in the afternoon, and I stayed the whole rest of the afternoon at the school in the classroom just by myself waiting. And I was probably reading and stuff, It didn't bother me. I mean, I love the Lord, and I was so devoted. I didn't care what anybody thought. And so at church, my friend that was the preacher's daughter, well, she and we would always be praying and speaking in tongues and everything. And we would even have I would be speaking in tongues and she would interpret it. I mean, it was true stuff too, not put on. I mean, we were doing the Lord's work, And then I sang in a trio with my 2 cousins, and we would go to different churches, and we would sing as a trio, and my uncle would play the guitar. And so that loneliness that I had, God blessed me. He knew I was very, kind of shy, and I felt lonely, and all of these things that he did for me helped me to, be able to talk to people, to witness people. And I mean, I was 100% my dream was I was going to marry a preacher, be a preacher's wife, which he probably really laughed whenever I said that. The Lord did, because like He knows how you are. And after I really grew up and I saw what all preachers' wives have to do and be like ready, in 5 minutes, because you never know who's coming to your house or what you're going to have to go do. And like, it really wouldn't work out for me because I'd be, oh, don't let him come in here right now. But, it just wouldn't be. But in my mind, that's what I thought it would be the ideal life. Be the preacher's wife, play the piano, and just, be the perfect wife for a perfect pastor and have a little perfect church. And I really thought I could do that. But then, praise the Lord, I didn't do it because it would have been a failure. And so I just, all through the years, when I was growing up, I was just really on fire for the Lord. I love Him so much. And I would tell everybody. And then I got to be a teenager. And so that loneliness that I had, then I'm a teenager. And so I would, and my daddy and all the people I was around, they were all Christians. And the men were all devoted to their families. And so I was kind of gullible, and like if somebody said they loved you, I really believed them, and so I had like I opened the door to thinking that a man could make me happy, and I still loved the Lord and everything, but I was like fooled. But I was kind of naive in a bit. I'm glad that I knew the Lord and all, but I wish I would have had a little more teaching about everybody is not good, because I didn't know anybody would lie to you or, take advantage of you. So I was kind of naive. And so I kind of had a lot of problems with men in my life. And so that's really the worst thing that ever happened to me was that I put faith in men, more than faith in God. And I wish I would have just let the Lord always be my comforter, and just stay innocent. And but I did have my 3 children, and I love them so much, and they did have the Lord preach to them day and night. They knew the way, and like I said, in our family, we did have a lot of depression. And it was just like a family thing, like a couple of grandmothers back. She had it really bad, and she really suffered a lot. And so it was just one of those things. Maybe it's like people say the curse or something. It seemed like in our family that there was those of us that just had to suffer through that. But like I said, the Lord knows us, and He knows our heart, and He knows what we need. And I'm just so thankful that when even the mistakes that I made, that I knew the Lord in the end. I think now, what if I didn't have the Lord in all those years that I was kind of wondering what terrible things could have happened to me, and it was just Him that helped me to make it through. And, then after a few experiences with men, then now I know Jesus is the only one that truly loves you unconditionally. He doesn't require any perfection. He just loves you the way that you are. And I'm just thankful that I have that. And I'm thankful that he talked to me when I was just a little child so that I would know it all of my life. And that is my testimony.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing, because it just goes to show that Jesus was with you like your whole life, and not only was he with you, but just hearing your testimony, it just looks like he gave you his heart, right? So his heart for like other people, and just kind of that like awareness of what would Jesus do in these times, even when he was like young. And that is, it's so amazing to hear, because just seeing how God moved through you when you was little, I think you said like 7, and well, even younger than that, really, because you were going to Sunday school at like 5, and then how he used you to bring your parents, to the Lord. And yeah, we go through times where sometimes we put our comfort in something else. I know I have many times, and well, for me, like I, backslid a few times, but just knowing that God was with you, and seeing that in your testimony, that is just, it's beautiful.
Thank you. And I wanted to say also that when I look back on it, how my grandmother, she grew up a Christian, and I know she prayed for all of the kids and everything. So that was important too, that my mother knew about the Lord when she was young from my grandmother. And so it's everybody that serves the Lord, you influence somebody else, and you may not even be trying to, or like my grandmother, she was not a show off person at all, but just every day you would see her living the truth, and always having compassion on people. And once, whenever I was probably about in the 5th grade, my sister and I, she was 4 years younger than me, and my grandmother was living with us, and there was a huge blizzard in Amarillo, and it was just like 6 foot deep snow. I mean, it was humongous storm, and no one could get out and do anything, and and it was just huge. And so one day, this man came walking down the sidewalk, and he had a coat on and everything, and he knocked on the door. And my mother went to the door, and he said, "I just wondered, is there any work that I could do for you, or is there something I could, he just needed an odd job, And so my mother said, "No, really, we don't have anything that you could do, And so he was like, "Oh, okay." And he went on, and my grandmother said, "Well, maybe he needs something to eat." So she goes to the door and she calls him, and she said, "Would you like to have some breakfast?" And he was like, "Oh, yes, ma'am," And so he came into our kitchen. He sat there, and my grandma made him a big old breakfast, and he asked the blessing over it and everything. And so he was, very thankful. And then when he left, and he just went on down the road, and my grandma said, "You never know." What is that scripture? When you entertain angels unaware. And me and my sister, that really, really stayed in our minds, And even after we were older, we would talk about whenever the angel came to our house, and so that was just the things like that she would teach us, that like everyday things, uh, it was all about the Lord, and so I just think every person, the Lord knows every person, all of your weaknesses, things that you struggle with, and things that are just, your quirks. He knows them, but He can use all of that to show His love and for you to be able to help others to understand that too.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing because I think of that verse every now and then, especially when like we're driving through town, and even when I see like someone holding a sign that says, that they need food or something. I always think of that verse about you never know when you're entertaining angels. I don't know exactly word for word, but yeah, that's amazing. Well, thank you, Sandy, for just coming on here and sharing your testimony with people. It blessed me to listen to it, and I'm sure it's going to bless whoever else listens to it. So thank you again.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening to this podcast. And before I go, if you need a Bible or if you know someone who needs a Bible, head on over to our website. It's www.outofthedarknessministry.com. And at our website, you can request a Bible, or if you want prayer for something, there's a form for that, and that'll go straight to our phones. And then if you enjoy listening to these podcasts, share it with your friends so that they can be blessed too. So thank you, and may God bless.